So I've got Boots Nell here of De Kraans Wines. Boots, I'm really glad that you could make the time to come and bring some of your great wines to pair with this dish. And so we've told you before what we're making. Tell us about the wines that you brought along.
Ruben, it's an honor to be here, so to start with, and I think I brought something different today. It's not the ordinary run-of-the-mill. I always say life's too boring to just drink Cabernet and Pinotage and Merlot and so on. You must try something new every now and then. And what I've done today is I brought a red wine and then a port, two totally different wines that you can try with a Springbok, smoked Springbok. And the red wine is what we call Tritonia. And Tritonia is we also call it a Calisdorp blend. And a Calisdorp blend is a wine that has to have at least 70% of Portuguese grape varieties in it. And in this wine, it's 100% Portuguese grape varieties. It's got 70% Touriga Nacional, about 30% Tinta Barroca, 20% Tinta Barroca and 10% Tinta Roriz. And the name Tritonia is from a small plant in the succulent Karoo, in the Klein Karoo. Just maybe to tell you that, you know, the Klein Karoo, the area between Calitzdorp, where the Kraans is situated, and Oudtshoorn, that area is the most species-rich area in the whole of the world. In that area, you will find 800 different species of mostly succulents and very small plants. And that is where the name Tritonia comes from. So it's got a little bit of a Portuguese flavor, but very much of a Klein Karoo name to it.
So I really enjoyed that with the Springbok, but you know, I'm quite excited to try the port. First of all, I'm a port lover, and it's like you just said there. I mean, it's great to try different things, you know, with food as well. When it comes to food and wine pairing, for me, I don't always think it's an exact science. It's not really, is it? But I'd really like to try that one. Tell me a little bit more about it.
That is a totally different kettle of fish. This is a big, bold wine. If you say it's a Cape Vintage Reserve, you're actually saying it's the best that you have in that year. You will also see it's got a Platter 5-star on top there, and we pride ourselves that we make some of the best vintage reserves in South Africa. And to do it every year, you really have to select very well to see that you've got the correct grapes. It's always a blend of 5 different varieties, all Portuguese varieties. Touriga Nacional, that gives you the lovely violets and the spice and the chocolate and so on. Then Tinta Barroca gives you a lot of structure in the port. You know, a port can become quite flabby if you make the port, and after 2-3 years you've only got Touriga in there, then the port falls flat. So you need the fruit of the Touriga, but also the structure of the Tinta Barroca. Then we also have Tinta Roriz in there, which is a big contributor to the acidity and the complexity of the wine. And then obviously Suzhou, which gives you a lot of color, and then Tinta Amarella. So it's all these wonderful varieties that you work with, and that's so nice about our area. You know, it's so different, and we learn every year still of the different Cape varieties what do well and what not.
Let's talk about De Kraans. I mean, it's a family-owned farm. It's been around
been in the family for a long time. My great-grandfather started in 1890. And all, you know, the Klein Karoo is also ostrich country. So they're all in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they all went into the ostrich business, where you could really buy a nice house for a few feathers. But they nearly went bust or bankrupt, you know, because of the Great Depression and all of that. And then they started going back to their basics, which was fruit farming. And they've done very well over the years. And then my father and his brother, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, they decided to build their own cellar at the Kraans. Didn't know anything about winemaking. They bought themselves a book, Handboek in die Wynbou, you know, handbook on winemaking from Professor Pierold. Professor Pierold is the person who started Pinotage. Yeah. And then they just started on page 1 and started making wine like that. And it was terrible wine, I can tell you that. I was so small, but it wasn't really great. But as time progressed, you know, they made better and better wine. So eventually they became an estate, and then they started experimenting with all kind of different varieties. And they decided they wanted to plant Shiraz, because they know Shiraz is a great variety for a warmer area, like a semi-desert area like Calitzdorp. And they said, okay, they're going to plant Shiraz. That was in 1973. And they planted the Shiraz, and about 3 years later, when it started bearing grapes, they decided, they had a look at the grapes and they said, no, well, this is not Shiraz, what is this? And then they found out it was Tinta Barocca. So they actually planted Tinta Barocca, and that is how the whole port industry in Calitzdorp started, by planting the wrong grapes. And then from then on, they started making wine with the Tinta Barocca. It immediately did very well on the wine shows. Also, the ports made from Tinta Barocca did very well. And wine writers started talking about Calitzdorp being the port capital of South Africa. And then after I got to the farm in the early 80s, 1980s, we started experimenting with other varieties like Touriga Nacional in the early 1990s and all the other ones. And now I think we've got the sort of a blend of varieties that we think is well suited in our area.
So, any thoughts? Which wine do you think I'm going to choose?
Sure, I don't know. I'm not sure about the port with this, although I think I've heard in the grapevine or through the grapevine that you've used a little bit of port sauce in there as well. So maybe the port, but I think I'll go for the Tritonia.
Okay. I'm going to shock you, and I'm going to tell you that I prefer the port with this Springbok dish. You know why? Because it's actually not a very sweet dish. It's got a bit of acidity, especially with that with the pickled walnuts, although it's got a bit of sweetness to it. And I think it's different, and that's why I'm going to go with that. It's maybe not, it's not only to shock you, it's because I really think I would prefer that port. I mean, after what you've told me, it's, I would like to know even more about port. So I'm going to come and visit you at the Krans in the near future.
It would be wonderful to see you there.
So listen, I just want to say thank you very much for just educating us a little bit more on port and bringing your really great wines. And I can hear and I can feel your passion. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. We're still going to enjoy the Springbok and some of this glorious, delicious port. Goodbye. Thanks, Boots.